No one wakes up hoping to be distracted. But somehow, by 10 a.m., your mind has been pulled in 100 directions. Notifications, trending posts, urgent emails, flashing headlines. And if you're like most people, you feel it. The creeping exhaustion of chasing 100 things while building nothing. And let's get this straight. This isn't a lack of discipline. It's not about being lazy, weak, or unmotivated. It's about living in a system that has engineered your environment to fracture your focus on purpose. They say the average person can't sit still. They scroll without thinking, switch tabs like it's breathing, and can't finish a thought without checking their phone. But this wasn't always the case. There was a time when we read full books, waited in silence, let boredom shape ideas instead of chasing the next flickering stimulus. But those days are gone, not because we evolved, but because we were conditioned. Every buzz, every ping, every little red dot on your screen, it's not there to serve you. It's there to train you, to salivate on command like Pavlov's dog, not for food, but for attention. Tiny dopamine hits, instant validation, no depth. You don't scroll for information. You scroll because your brain's been rewired to crave frictionless stimulation. And slowly, your ability to pause, to reflect, to think strategically erodes. In a world of ultra-speed, slowness is punished. If you hesitate, you're falling behind. If you plan, you're overthinking. If you wait, you're lazy. But the truth? The truth is that your attention is being monetized, and your long-term thinking is being treated like a threat. Because it is. The person who can see 10 years ahead, they're hard to manipulate. They don't need what's being sold. They don't click impulsively, spend emotionally, or react without intention. They're dangerous to a system built on urgency and noise. Microsoft once said that human attention spans have dropped to 8 seconds, less than a goldfish. Let that sink in. We've been turned into creatures of the now, incapable of holding a vision long enough to build a future. Not by accident, by design. Because a distracted mind doesn't build. It buys. It doesn't create. It consumes. And every time you can't finish what you start, every time you quit a goal that takes time, you reinforce the belief that slowness equals failure, when in fact, slowness is the only way anything real is ever built. We are being taught to confuse activity with progress, to think that being busy means being productive. But the person who's always reacting is never in control. They're just stuck in a loop of urgency, always plugged in, but never present. It's not that you're broken. It's that the world around you is perfectly calibrated to keep you too distracted to resist. Look at how we define success today. Quick money, quick fame, quick pleasure. Long-term sacrifice? That's for fools. But here's the twist. The people who profit the most, they're the ones playing the longest game of all. They sell you speed while they move with patience. They sell you freedom while they tighten the cage. They train you to chase dopamine while they chase domination. And all it takes to break their rhythm is a pause. When you slow down, you see. When you see, you start to question. And when you question, you become impossible to control. But no one wants that. So instead, we're kept sedated. Not with violence, but with convenience. Not with chains, but with constant stimulation. And once you realize that, you stop blaming yourself, and you start fighting back. This is not the death of intelligence. This is the assassination of attention, and it's happening in broad daylight. Welcome to the machine, but the moment you notice the gears, you're no longer just a cog. It starts early. Before you even know what long-term means, you're taught how to sit still, raise your hand, and follow directions. You're graded not for asking better questions, but for memorizing answers you didn't choose, under deadlines you didn't set, for rewards that don't last. This is not education. It's obedience training. And it's not preparing you for life. It's preparing you for a life that someone else profits from. Think about it. In school, you aren't taught to build systems. You're taught to fit into one. You're not rewarded for creating a future. You're rewarded for surviving the moment. Get the grade. Pass the test. Stay in line. There is no space for reflection, no encouragement for stillness, no training in how to wait, observe, or build something that might take years. Patience is never taught because it's not profitable. Discipline is twisted into a performance. Creativity is boxed into rubrics. And so, by the time you step into the adult world, you're already primed for short-term thinking. You want a job now, success now, comfort now, not because you're shallow, but because everything you've been taught was designed to make you allergic to delay. You didn't learn how to resist temptation. You learned how to obey urgency. And what happens when a generation is taught to obey urgency? You get workers who chase promotions instead of purpose. You get consumers who buy relief instead of value. You get minds that react instead of resist. The result? A world that looks productive, but is spiritually bankrupt. We multitask like machines, but we build nothing of substance. We chase likes and numbers, but struggle to define meaning. We drown in stimulation, but feel more anxious than ever, and still, the system claps for us. Good job, you're keeping up. But keeping up with what? A race no one wins, a loop no one escapes, unless they first see it for what it is. Because the deeper truth is this: short-term thinking is not a glitch. It's the primary feature. When you're stuck in a 24-hour loop, you can't plan rebellion. You can't question power. You're too busy making rent, chasing deadlines, managing alerts, and keeping up with noise that doesn't feed your soul, just feeds the machine. And they want it that way. Because the man who's exhausted, he won't challenge the system. He'll blame himself, and then work harder, in a maze he didn't design. Look at finance. They don't teach you to save. They sell you debt disguised as freedom. Buy now, pay later isn't a convenience. It's a leash, a tool to keep you leveraged and dependent. They don't want you disciplined, because discipline is powerful. A man who waits isn't impulsive, and an impulsive man is a consumer's dream. So instead of encouraging patience, they glamorize indulgence. And instead of praising savers, they praise spenders, right up until the debt drowns them. Then the system profits again. From interest, from fear, from control. Now pair that with content. Short, addictive, endless. You're told this is entertainment. But it's not. It's neural fragmentation. Every 10 seconds, your brain resets. Until sitting through a book feels like torture. Until holding one idea in your mind feels like work. Until thinking ahead feels pointless. And that is the true purpose of distraction. To make clarity feel painful. So you avoid it. So you never sit still long enough to see who you've become. Because when you start thinking long-term, you ask dangerous questions. Who benefits from this design? What kind of life do I actually want? What if I don't want to play this game anymore? And they don't want you asking those. They want you scrolling, not planning, reacting, not resisting, wanting, not building. Because if you started building, you'd realize you never needed half of what they sold you. So here's the truth. You're not just distracted. You're being trained to be distracted. And every time you blame yourself for it, the system wins again. But once you see the trap for what it is, the game changes. You don't need to sprint harder. You need to step back, get quiet, look ahead. Because the moment you think long-term is the moment you become dangerous. There's a molecule inside your brain that once helped you survive. Dopamine. It told ancient humans when to pursue food, chase shelter, seek safety. It rewarded curiosity, effort, and discovery. But in today's world, that same molecule has been weaponized, not to protect you, but to keep you hooked. You're not chasing survival anymore. You're chasing likes, alerts, sales, streams, attention. Not because you want to, because your brain's reward system has been hijacked by design. Every beep, every buzz, every badge notification, it's a trigger, a tiny promise. Something important is happening. Your brain listens. It releases a burst of dopamine, giving you a momentary high, a quick reward. And what do you do next? You chase the next hit, and the next, and the next, until the idea of stillness becomes unbearable, until the urge to check feels stronger than the will to focus. This isn't addiction by accident, it's manipulation by architecture. Open your phone right now. How many apps? How many red circles? How many loops? TikTok Reels, YouTube Shorts, Insta Stories, designed to never end. You're not weak for getting trapped. You were baited. This isn't about self-control. It's about psychological warfare disguised as convenience. The battlefield is your nervous system, and the currency is your attention. Stanford psychiatrist Dr. Anna Lembach called it out. Overexposure to quick rewards is crippling the brain's ability to think long-term. The problem isn't that you're lazy, it's that you're overstimulated. And the more stimulation you get, the less tolerance you have for anything slow, quiet, or complex. That's the real theft. Not your time, but your capacity for patience. In 2023, Pew Research reported that 84% of American adults check their phones repeatedly just to make sure they didn't miss something. Not because they need to, but because their brains have been conditioned to expect the next micro-hit of pleasure. We've become dopamine junkies in a lab built by Silicon Valley, and the product isn't the app. It's you, your eyeballs, your attention, your behavior. And this isn't neutral, because a distracted person isn't just inattentive, they're vulnerable. If you can't sit with silence, you'll never sit with discomfort. If you can't wait for meaning, you'll settle for stimulation. And when that happens, you're not building a future, you're just surviving the present. That's what they want. A population that reacts on command, scrolls without question, buys without purpose, and lives their lives in someone else's rhythm. It's a game, and the rules are simple. Pleasure is bait, urgency is the hook, and your silence is the enemy. Because silence leads to clarity, and clarity leads to rebellion, not with violence, but with disobedience, with choice, with independence, with the radical decision to say, I will not trade my future for another dopamine spike. But here's the thing, even real change now feels unnatural. You try to meditate and your skin itches. You try to read and your fingers twitch. You try to plan your life and your brain begs for distraction. Because you've been rewired to believe that discomfort is failure. That slowness means you're falling behind. That silence means you're missing out. But none of it's true. Stillness isn't failure, it's resistance. When you reclaim your focus, you don't just get clarity. You take back agency. Because the man who can wait, who can sit with tension and still stay the course, is no longer owned by the system. He doesn't chase crumbs of approval. He doesn't panic when the feed is quiet. He doesn't follow trends because he follows vision. That's what makes him powerful. That's what makes him free. And the system knows this. That's why it doesn't need to imprison you. It just needs to keep you entertained, pacified, numb, plugged in. Because as long as you're chasing dopamine, you'll never chase truth. So the question is simple. Will you keep feeding a cycle that profits off your impulses? Or will you begin the slow, quiet, powerful process of reclaiming your mind? Because what you focus on grows. And if you never control your focus, someone else always will. In a world that glorifies chaos, the quiet man becomes a threat. Not because he shouts louder, but because he doesn't need to. He doesn't scroll for validation. He doesn't flinch when the world shakes. He doesn't dance to the rhythm of noise. He chooses stillness. And today, that's more than a virtue. It's revolutionary. The modern man is taught to perform, to be busy, responsive, constantly available. You've seen it. Always online, always on the grind, wired for reaction, addicted to urgency. But beneath the performance is a hollow ache. Because if you never stop, how will you ever know what you're really running toward? We call it hustle. But most of the time, it's escape. Escape from silence, from discomfort, from self. Enter the Stoics. They lived centuries before dopamine hijacks and infinite scroll, but they saw it coming. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor ruling one of history's greatest empires, wrote not to the world, but to himself. In his journals, he warned, "Do not let your soul be pulled by externals." He ruled millions, yet fought every day to master one thing, his own mind. Because Marcus knew something we've forgotten. The man who can't master himself will be mastered by someone else. And what is stillness? It's not passivity. It's not weakness. It's command. The kind of command that says, I do not need to react. I do not need to prove. I do not need to be seen. In that moment, you become untouchable to the system. You don't need their urgency. You don't need their applause. You don't need their fake rewards. Because your power is no longer for sale. And that's exactly why modern culture is terrified of stillness. Because stillness produces vision. And vision is dangerous to the machine. Why? Because vision makes you build for the long term. And long-term builders can't be manipulated. You don't chase the trend. You create something that outlives it. You don't fear the silence. You use it to think deeper than they ever wanted you to. That's not stagnation. That's resistance. The Stoic doesn't react when others panic. He doesn't drown in chaos. He observes it, then acts, intentionally. Not fast, not flashy, but precisely. Because he knows the truth. Most urgency is bait. Most praise is manipulation. Most fear is manufactured. So he doesn't build for speed. He builds for strength. And while the world spins, he holds. We've mistaken movement for meaning. But the man who rushes blindly isn't going anywhere. He's just burning out in loops. The Stoic sees that and steps aside. Not because he's indifferent, but because he's awake. And in a system that feeds on reaction, stillness is rebellion. Here's the secret. The world isn't afraid of noise. It's afraid of the person who can sit in silence and stay whole. The man who doesn't need external permission to feel enough. The man who delays gratification, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. The man who says no to what's fast because he sees what's real. That's who they fear, because he's immune. So train yourself like the Stoics did, not with hype, but with habit. Wake in silence. Reflect before responding. Question before consuming. Build slowly. Delay what feels good now for what matters forever. Every time you wait, you sharpen your edge. Every time you pause, you reclaim your focus. And every time you resist the system's rhythm, you remember your own. Because the man who doesn't need applause can finally hear his own truth. The man who doesn't beg for pleasure can finally create something with meaning. And the man who can sit in the storm is the one who never drowns. Let's be brutally honest. The system doesn't want to destroy you. That would be obvious. It just wants to wear you down, slowly, quietly, until you stop asking where your life is going and just accept whatever is handed to you. So it feeds you urgency. It seduces you with speed. It sells you comfort disguised as success. And in return, you give away your attention, your patience, and eventually, your vision. But here's the shift. Once you see it, you can no longer unsee it. And from that moment on, you have a choice. Keep dancing to their rhythm, or reclaim your own. Reclaiming doesn't mean retreating. You don't need to delete every app, vanish into a cave, or abandon modern life. But you do need to protect your mind like it's sacred, because it is. The average person checks their phone 150 times a day. The builder? He checks his direction that often. The average person multitasks to feel busy. The builder single tasks to make impact. The average person plans their week around noise. The builder protects silence like oxygen. So what does it look like? Let's make it real, practical, repeatable. Your daily practice begins here. 1. 30 minutes of solitude. Every morning. No phone, no screen, just you. A pen, a journal, a single question. Where am I headed? And who is deciding that path? Ask it daily. Let the discomfort sharpen you. You're not looking for motivation. You're looking for alignment. 2. Read 10 difficult pages every day. Not tweets, not clickbait, but something dense, something real. Why? Because it rewires your brain for depth, not distraction. Every page is a quiet rebellion against a world addicted to easy. 10 pages a day? That's over 3,000 pages a year of wisdom, and no one can take that from you. 3. Invest without reward. Build something. Learn something. Save something. Without applause. Do one thing each day that pays off in 10 years, not 10 seconds. A skill, a habit, a system, a body, a relationship. Every drop of patience you train now becomes a flood of strength later. 4. Kill the noise. Turn off every notification that doesn't save your life. Delete every app that sells you urgency. Do this once, and you'll realize the world didn't end. You just finally began. Most noise isn't keeping you informed. It's keeping you from yourself. 5. Build for who you want to become. Forget productivity hacks. Forget dopamine schedules. This isn't optimization. It's liberation. Because if you build for today's feelings, you stay a slave to them. But if you build for tomorrow's vision, you rise above them. Your goals don't need to be loud. They need to be aligned. Your path doesn't need applause. It needs discipline. And that brings us here. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not lazy. You are overstimulated, overscheduled, overexposed to manipulation. But the moment you pause, the moment you sit in silence, the moment you say, "No more, I choose depth over dopamine," that's the moment you become dangerous again. Because the most powerful man is not the one who can move the fastest. It's the one who can wait, build, and think beyond the next dopamine spike. That man can't be sold. He can't be rushed. He can't be owned. He's no longer a product. He's the architect. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Mastery of the self is the highest power. Not power over others, but power over your own urgency, your own impulse, your own fears. And when you reclaim that, you become something the system was never designed to handle, a mind that thinks for itself, a man who plays the long game, a builder of futures too stable to shake. You will be misunderstood, you will be mocked, but you will not be moved, because in a world trained to consume, you will be the one who creates. Not faster, not louder, but deeper. So start small, but start today. Because in a culture that monetizes your distraction, the most revolutionary act is not to shout. It's to see clearly, move slowly, and never, ever stop thinking for yourself.